Here we are with Judge Charles Thomas, clearly my favorite judge that I've ever been in front of. And it's a pleasure to have you on here. You have not only been a judge for me, but a mentor for me, a client of mine, a friend. I mean, and you were like a colleague of my father's and a student of my father with my father. Were you not?
Absolutely. He was a couple of years behind me in law school, but I remember him very, very well.
Amazing. So
Yeah,
you couldn't be a more perfect judicial person for me to ask questions of. I think, right?
I'm here. I'm here to answer.
There you go. All right. So before we get the very rare chance of an attorney questioning a judge, by the way, do judges like being questioned by attorneys?
Probably not. But you're a friend as well. I have no problem listening to you. So go on.
There you
I
go.
can,
Why don't we start by, because some people are going to listen to this hopefully more than just our friends and relatives, and they don't know who you are. Why don't you tell us? I know you went to law school with my father way back when, Brooklyn Law, but why don't you take us through some of your history?
my history. Well, uh, uh, I was born in the Bronx, went to Bronx Science, went to Brooklyn Law School, Brooklyn College, went to the Army, worked as an attorney for 22 years, my own practice. And then one day I said to myself, it's time to do something different. And I made moves to get a judgeship. I'll tell you how that worked. I walked over to my district leader, who I met him on the street. I introduced myself. And I said, you know what? I would like to be a judge. He said, that's great because I can get more work out of you than somebody who comes along and tells me they're interested in the issues of the day. And so fine, we were honest with each other. And I got involved in politics. I became the president of the club. I became chairman of the board of the club. And I paid my dues. And when I would complain to my district leader, what's going on, he would always remind me, listen, Harry Truman started this way, so don't worry about it. You'll be okay. Or you'll be okay. And one thing led to another, and I finally was able to get the designation, and I ran in a very hotly contested primary in Rockaway, where I live. And I won by a grand total of 111 votes. And here I am, 30 some odd years later, 40 years later, we did it. So it's been a great experience.
How, how many years?
That's how I got there.
How many years did you sit on the bench?
28 years on the bench, and then another 10 years as a judicial hearing officer. I would still be a judicial hearing officer if it wasn't for COVID, which did away with the program.
Yeah, I personally think you should still be a judge, not a judicial.
Well, the Constitution said I'm too old. They retired me.
It's interesting. So let's talk about that for a second. The Constitution said you were too old to be a judge, even though it's clear that you're capable of doing it. But apparently it has no such restrictions for who could be the president of the United States.
Right. And that it doesn't seem to stop federal courts from going till they drop. But in New York State, it's 76. Actually, I think there were in certain states, it's probably even less. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to have become a judicial hearing officer in light of the situation. I enjoyed that, and they treated me very well. I have no complaints about that. I would like to be a judge, but hey, we get old. Things happen.
Well, let's reel you back to when you were an attorney and you made that jump from attorney to judge.
Right.
And you said you just kind of went right through that. Said, I was an attorney for 22 years, and I just decided I wanted to be a judge. Well, wait a minute. I've been an attorney for 29 years. I never had that thought when I was walking on the streets. Let me just change and become a judge. What prompted you to do that?
Well, I guess my wife was pretty influential in that. Actually, when I first started practicing law, I went to small claims court with my wife as an observer, and she loved the idea of seeing the courtroom and the majesty of the dark wood benches, and it was something very rich and exciting to her. She said, "I want to see you up there one day." I said, "Nah, we got time for that." And we did have time for that, but little by little, I'm out there. I was practicing law, And frankly, I got a little bit of a burnout. I was getting tired of doing the same thing all the time. I wanted to change. To my mind, being a judge was the highest thing you can be as a lawyer. It's the best job in the world. So there was something to strive for. And I strived.
Right, and you didn't just strive; you thrived. I mean, you know, maybe some of the people watching this don't know your reputation, but I do. It's pretty stellar. Let me ask you a question. So, first day on the job. So you're a judge. You get sworn in, which I've seen that. That's pretty cool when your family comes and it's a really regal and formal process and really a nice thing to participate in. And I've been lucky to be invited to a lot of them. Not yours. I think I was like, I don't know, maybe in college when you were sworn in. But what was your first day like as a judge? What's that like? Day one?
Day one was they sent me to the Bronx, to criminal court, and arraignments in criminal court. I knew nothing about it, really. I had practiced a little bit of criminal law, but not a hell of a lot. And they put me on the bench with a seasoned old timer who's up there, and I watched what he was doing. And I said to him, after about 10 minutes of watching him, I said, I could do this. You can go in the back. And he went in the back and read the newspaper. And it just flowed. It just flowed. It was funny that the first case I really had in arraignments was a criminal case. And the attorney who came out was an attorney from Queens that I knew who he was. I was surprised to see an attorney from Queens in the Bronx. It was a big drug case. And I didn't know what the numbers were when you asked for bail. I had no idea I wasn't given really any specific instructions. But in the criminal court, you get a back on the pleadings, and if another judge had already written something on it would be there, so you could get a guideline as to what had been there before. And the pleading came out, and it showed the judge had given $500 on bail. So when it came time for me, I said $500. And the district attorney, he went nuts. How could you do that, Judge? This is a monster drug case. This is terrible, blah, 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 blah. I said, oh boy, this is a hell of a way to start the business. And so I went home. I didn't sleep that night, came back the next morning. I spoke to my administrative judge, a fellow named Larry Tonetti, who was a wonderful guy. And he said, look, I spoke to the DA. The DA at the time was Mario Barola. I explained the situation, and Mario said, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. It turned out it was okay because all of these drugs that supposedly this defendant had wasn't really drugs. It was just talcum powder. So, I mean, that was an interesting way to start my career. So that was my first day.
That's a big first day. What year was that?
1983.
You go. See, I was in high school.
Yeah, I was elected in 82, and in a very, very hard-fought and competitive race. And a primary, I had a primary. That was my problem. I didn't get this. It wasn't a sale, and I had a lot of opposition. I was lucky though in my election because I had three opponents, and one opponent who could have been really very, very much the opposition was collecting signatures to get on the ballot. And it turned out he had a friend of mine collecting ballot signatures. I went over, I said, how could you do this to me? You're collecting signatures against me, and you know me all these years, and you're doing for him. He said, don't worry. He says, I'm only collecting where people don't know me and they don't know you. Whatever that means. Okay. It turned out he went to the wrong district to collect signatures, and he never got on the ballot. Thankfully. Anyway, the fate. So did I make myself clear on that?
Yeah, very clear. So whatever became of this was your chief opponent, who couldn't even get his signatures right on the ballot. Whatever happened to him?
I never knew. I never saw him again. I never saw him in court. I don't know what happens. Yeah, never saw him.
Sounds like it was a good idea that he not be qualified for the bench.
Yeah. Well, actually, he had a very interesting um, slogan. I had the Democratic line, but he had the conservative line, the liberal line, and the Republican line. And his slogan was 3 out of 4, let's make it unanimous. And I mean, it was sort of scary in a way. I mean, but thankfully my district was very much the Democratic district. And I won by a big deal, 111 votes, but we did it.
Hey,
And
so
after that, I was elected several other times, but it was never a problem.
right, but well, that's because now you're on the bench and you demonstrate that you
Yeah.
have some skills. What was that like, that first election? Like, is it like election night like we see now on TV? How did you know, like, hey, you won? Like, how did that work?
It was just like you see on TV. You're sitting in a room and they're calling in numbers, and your club is listening to the numbers, and you're getting results. They got a board on in the club that shows you who's who, what's what. And actually, I had to go to court because they tried to knock me off once I even got my plurality of 111 votes. And yeah, it was like TV.
Wow,
But that was the only time it ever happened that way. Otherwise, there was very, very much perfunctory matter of fact, because it is overwhelmingly Democratic area, and you wait your turn, and you don't get caught with your pants down. You do okay.
Perfect. Getting caught with your pants down. That's a perfect segue into where we're going to go.